Thank you for tuning in to watch our Invest Palm Beach launch conference. You're about to watch panel number 3, Moving Forward, an in-depth look at transit-oriented development. Enjoy.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone who attended this morning. Excellent first 2 panel discussions, and I know this third one, titled Moving Forward, an in-depth look at transit-oriented development and infrastructure in Palm Beach County, will hopefully deliver to your expectations. To go ahead and get started, I have a question for all. If you could introduce yourself as well, a little bit of background about your organization, that would be perfect. Quoting a headline, sorry, Valerie, quoting a headline from the Wall Street Journal last year that stated the biggest South Florida housing boom is near the rail stations. Would you say that's an accurate depiction of West Palm Beach and the communities around Palm Beach County? And if so, would you please explain your viewpoint there? Where do you want to start? Jonathan?
Good morning. I'm Jonathan Hopkins. I'm the Executive Director of WPB Go, which is a public-private partnership here in West Palm Beach focused on transportation. Previously was VP of Mobility at Brightline, so this is a little bit pertinent to me. I think it's really clear that 2018 to 2023 was really a Brightline era for West Palm Beach and for the other cities lucky enough to have a station. It also points to the need for 2024, for the next 2 to 4 years, to be planning of what comes next. And with respect to this, our job over the next few years is to plan and build an engine that can help. You know, if you think of the jobs that and the economy that we've created in this region, it's kind of a mountain that we have to be able to clear with our housing and transportation system, a system that works together like an engine. And it means you have to put the right pieces in the right places. If you're building a car, you don't put the pistons in the tailpipe. If you're building a plane, you don't put the fuel tanks at the tail of the plane and the engines on the wings, because you won't be able to clear a mountain. It'll sputter and crash, right? We have to do the same thing with our housing and transportation. The closer you put housing to where people work, the less they have to drive, or they don't have to drive at all, which can save them money, save us all congestion, and give us a lot more capacity. So certainly West Palm Beach is an encapsulation of what should be happening in a lot of cities in this county. And we do have the means to do it if we look at some of the best practices across the country.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. Todd?
Good morning. Todd Bonlarron, Assistant County Administrator with Palm Beach County. That is your county. And I also have administrative oversight over PalmTran, amongst many departments that I work in that capacity. One thing that I will tell you is, you know, to that headline specifically, in some cases, yes, they're right. But in a lot of cases, I think they're not. Because, you know, what we're seeing in Palm Beach County is we're seeing growth and growth patterns in many ways that are reminiscent of a comprehensive plan that was developed really back in the 70s and has been adjusted likewise. So we see in developers like big open spaces and places to build. And so we continue to see that. If you look at the north end of the county, a lot of the tremendous growth that's happening up there, not necessarily along some of our transit corridors. If you look out west in our county, where there's a lot of growth happening there, again, lots of growth that's happening out in those corridors. West Palm Beach is doing, I think, a really nice job in trying to balance some of that. But, you know, the other side of it is that, you know, we're building lots of high rises in our city of West Palm Beach, most of which are not affordable in workforce housing. And as we work with developers, both here in the city and throughout the county and our various cities, we do need to continue to focus on what percentage and a portion of that housing that's going to remain workforce housing. Because let's face it, I mean, the folks that are wanting and needing transit, a lot of times are people that are also wanting and needing workforce and affordable housing. Gary Lesser in the first panel today alluded to a piece of legislation in Tallahassee, the Live Local Act. And that act, we hope, what it will do, it will spur that kind of development along some of our transit corridors. So not just Brightline and Tri-Rail that you see coming to downtown, but Congress Avenue, Military Avenue, which are some of our most traversed routes throughout Palm Beach County in terms of transit for PalmTran. That's where we hope to see some of that development and redevelopment. And so you can build and cluster some of that workforce housing along those corridors where we have frequency of transit. And we think that will offer a great experience for our workforce in helping get people to where they need to be.
Great, thank you, Todd. And Valerie?
Uh, Good morning, Valerie Neilson. I'm the Executive Director of the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. We are a federally mandated agency, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Palm Beach County, and we plan and prioritize state and federal dollars for this county, primarily capital dollars for the federal aid system. So we're looking out into the future. We've seen tremendous change over since Brightline, and here in our landscape, in addition to the growth, you can just see downtown how much has ballooned around the Brightline station since it came in. And really looking at that across the board, across the county, we have a lot of underdeveloped land in the core areas. We've talked about transportation and housing affordability. We are one of the most expensive counties in the country when it comes to housing and transportation. With both of those costs combined, if you can help with alleviate with one of them and putting the jobs and the transit closer to the housing, then you can alleviate people to not have to have a car payment, to not have to have car insurance and have to drive these long distances. So looking at both the chicken and the egg, things like you have the Brightline station in West Palm Beach that's experienced all this development around it, but then also doing smart development like Meisner Park and Boca Raton, because they had that type of density and that type of land use development that attracted an over $40 million private public partnership to develop a station there. So we're really looking at the county as a whole, looking for those transit oriented development opportunities. Where can we redevelop land use at key nodes of that serve transit so that we can have more housing and invite that type of development? And just where does it make sense to really invest in more premium transit as well?
Great. Thank you all three. Valerie, if I could stay with you. The TPA has put extensive work into its complete streets policy to give workers and residents more mobility options and make greater use of the connected transportation network. How do initiatives like Complete Streets and Vision Zero promote safer, equitable mobility? And what's the return on investment for funding these projects?
Sure. So complete streets, if you're not aware with that term, it means when you design or build a street, you're really thinking about all the users. Regardless, even if you drive, your trip begins and ends as a pedestrian walking to your car or walking to where your final destination is. So really connecting those sidewalks, making it inviting and safe for everyone, people of all ages and abilities to walk, bike, take transit, have options. Not everyone can afford or has the physical ability to drive a car. So by connecting the streets and the network, you're providing access to opportunity, access to healthcare, access to quality of life, which is what we all want. Communities that have walkability, that have connected sidewalks, that are inviting for people of all ages, are more desirable. People want to live in communities that you can walk. And when it comes to transit, there's a stat that from the American Public Transportation Association that for every $1 invested in transit, there's a $5 return on investment. So these are good investments. We've been encouraging local municipalities. We have 39 municipalities. We have 6 who have adopted complete streets policies. In the country, over 1,700 complete streets policies. But what does that mean? That means that every level of that government, from the staff level, top down, bottom up, whenever they approve a site development, maybe it's a grocery store, they're making sure that the sidewalks and the different connections are being made so that when someone gets off their bus to get to work or maybe they're driving, you're not just thrown out into a sea of asphalt. You actually have a walkable community and you don't have to drive everywhere.
Great. Thank you, Valerie. Todd, the next question's for you, and it's a bit more focused on Palm Tran as you oversee those operations as well. One of the latest initiatives underway at Palm Tran has been the Port St. Lucie Express. What do Palm Tran's priorities and long-term projects tell us about the demographic shifts underway for residents and workers in Palm Beach County and the neighboring counties to the north?
Ryan, great project that you brought up. The Port St. Lucie Express is one that really kind of grew it organically out of surveys that we did, both downtown, other locations, about what some of the needs that our workforce had. And I don't know who's driven on 95 north during rush hour lately, okay? But as you sort of cross over, used to kind of cross that PGA boundary and it was like, oh, home free. Not anymore. I mean, when you get to across that Martin County line and you're working your way towards Port St. Lucie, it is a traffic jam. And so we have a park and ride that we developed up there in Port St. Lucie, along with the Department of Transportation. They've agreed to fund for the next 3 years an express that will go from Port St. Lucie into downtown West Palm, connecting with our intermodal and loop throughout the downtown community. There'll be 2 runs in the morning from West Palm and St. Lucie and back, and 2 in the late afternoon, evening. And we think that that's going to be a great opportunity to look at some of those choice riders, folks who have cars, who choose to park them somewhere, get in a bus, and come here. And those are going to be like coach-style buses, not necessarily the PalmTran buses that you see, but the amenities that you'll have in that are some of the same amenities, though, that we have in our regular buses. So if you like to text in the morning and charge your phone and get on your computer and need Wi-Fi, that is in every one of our buses that we have. But the reality of it is that we've got a lot of great things in the works. Just yesterday, the Board of County Commissioners did something that we don't do too often, which was eliminate and compact and reduce a couple of routes in the county for fixed transit, and are putting in pilots for TNC pilots. So we have regions in the north end of the county, in the central area around Royal Palm Beach, and then in Boca Raton, where we're going to be helping to fund certain Uber, Lyft trips to and from people's homes to our transit systems to kind of create some of that first and last mile connectivity. And I think those are the types of things that we need to be doing to make sure that people know that we're trying to meet some of those needs. Finally, I'll share one story with you. A few months ago, I was on Dixie Highway on the south end of West Palm Beach, which is where I live, and I was standing at the light at Gregory to cross the street east to go home. And my neighbor pulls up next to me in her big SUV. She was coming from the grocery store. She rolls to the window. She says, "Hey, Todd, what are you doing?" And I was in my suit. I had my briefcase. And I said, "Oh, I'm just walking home." She's like, "Well, where's your car?" I said, "Well, I took PalmTran to work today. I took the bus." And she's like, "Do you need a ride home?" And I said, "Well, I'll get in the car with you. You can drive me home." She looked at me like I was a fish out of water. And for the next, 5-6 minutes, all she did was pepper me about, "Well, why did you take the bus today?" I said, "Well, I take the bus every once in a while. It's actually pretty easy. It's a 2-block walk from my house to get there. It's a 2-block walk from where it drops me off at the library to go from there to the governmental center. And it's super easy. And I text and I make calls and I work on my computer." And so 5 times in the last 2 months, I have had people from my neighborhood come up to me and say, "You take the bus to work?" I was at the art show last week here at the convention center. I had a guy come up to me and said, "Hey, Kat told me you take the bus to work." And, I'm like, it's really cool that that's become the hot topic of community happy hours. But what I share that story because sometimes transit just takes a little leadership in the community. And when I see Kelly Smallridge get on a bus from Wellington to come downtown and tweet about it, when I see Greg Weiss take Brightline to Orlando for conferences and it becomes stories, when Valerie takes her board with us around and they talk about it and people see it, it means that those of us who are leaders in our community saying, transit works, it's affordable, you can do it, it's easy. And I think those are the kinds of things that we in this room, and I see a lot of leaders in here, and we're challenging leaders all throughout our community and our county to just take transit. Tell us what your experience is, talk about it, and we think that it can be contagious if you do that.
Great. Thank you, Todd. And I know you referenced buses, rail, but I know Valerie and her team, bikes are definitely a go-to option as well, barring any rain. Jonathan, before our closing question, I had one specific for you. Understanding the state of Florida, you could say it is a car-friendly state. We're really trying to shift away from that. And I know you and your team, you've tapped into the business community to test new incentives and strategies on employee commuting behaviors. And I know those commuting behaviors are so important. They end up in our census of what the average commute time is in each city. So what type of outcomes have you seen so far from those programs and initiatives? And what other opportunities could be implemented in the near future to understand the commuting behaviors in Palm Beach County?
So thanks for that question. So what we've been doing is working with employers to see, can we get their employees to work a little bit better, right? You heard from the first panel today that people are coming from a county, 2 counties away to get to work. That's not a good quality of life that we'd want for anybody. And that really means to solve it, we have to be able to make our roads more efficient, right? And we will never be able to meet the demands of our economy by just expanding the roadway size. It's going to give us marginal couple % increases in capacity. But a light rail train coming every 4 minutes is the equivalent to a 20-lane freeway of capacity. And that doesn't, get stopped as much as a car. If you can shift a lot of people to that, then you actually have a capacity for a lot more economic growth. And I think is anybody opposed to economic growth? Okay. So yeah, I think we've seen so that we'd be all on board on the outcomes that we need to have that. So some of the things that we're going to be testing in collaboration with Palm Tran and some of the other transit agencies, like, well, what if employers purchase transit passes? Would more people ride? And the answer undoubtedly is yes, because we're all, students of economics and we know how economics work. The cost goes down, people are going to ride it more. What's really important in all of this, however, is that we don't actually give enough people in our county the opportunity to viably ride transit like Todd has the benefit of doing, or like sometimes I or Valerie have the benefit of doing. If it takes 2 hours to get somewhere because the bus comes every 60 minutes and you have to transfer, it's not really a viable option for a lot of people. Palm Tran runs a great service. Once you get on the bus, it is absolutely fantastic. Problem is just the bus doesn't come often enough. And so so what is that? If we force everybody to drive, it's not a freedom-loving country if everybody has to drive to participate in the economy. It's a $12,000 tax per year. Riding the bus costs about $840, right? And so if we can give more people access to that, then it gives them an opportunity to cut their cost of living. Our inflation rate was the highest in the country in South Florida last year, and driven by cost of transportation plus housing. And so we have to do something to combat that. Otherwise, our economy is like a jet engine, but our transportation system is like a bunch of Cessnas. And that does require smart growth. Like if Tri-Rail is dropping you off in the equivalent of an empty field, that is also a Cessna, right? It's not giving people access to these $100 to $200 million investment we're making a year. So we have to do smart growth to make all of this possible. And the bus needs to come every 15 minutes on a lot of corridors. And if we're going to make that investment, a lot of people need access to it, which means they need to live 1 or 2 blocks away like Todd does.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And our closing question for the event as well. This is the 5th anniversary edition of Invest Palm Beach. And what we've asked with a lot of leaders and experts across the county is to take a look back at the last 5 years, but also to take a look forward at the next 5 years. And sometimes we just jump into 2030 of what you'd like to see in the county. As it relates to transportation, I'd like to ask all of you just to share a viewpoint, any story or anything of the sort. What would you like to see in terms of transportation, knowing it's not a short-term game, it is a long-term game, but what are your hopes?
Hopes. We are a really smart county with a lot of great businesses and some really incredible people. On this topic, we need to apply it more to it, right? Our counties to the south of us are part of one broader economy, but they're also kind of competitors. And they've done some work beyond what we've done to fund solutions to the problem that we're all talking about. And so I really think it's a challenge of like, how do we think of our housing and transportation system together? Don't shoot for just enough. We're going to run into that mountain, right? We need to be able to maximize the housing capacity. That's how you keep housing costs low, and do so in a way that allows people of all incomes to live within a transit ride, a walk, or a bike ride of where they need to go. If that's a challenge that we'll accept, then we definitely have the human capital in this room and in this county to do it. But we need to accept the challenge and step up.
I think when you look 5 years out, you're selling yourself short, particularly when it comes to the issue of transit and transportation. I mean, we really have to be thinking today about 30 and 40 years out from where we're going and begin planning for that. I can share with you, one thing that Jonathan and his organization are doing that's great is it's bringing business leaders together around the issue of transit and mobility. The one great thing that Valerie and her organization are doing, they're bringing community organizations, they're bringing a lot of our partners in the public sector, our municipalities and our county leaders together to have that conversation. We need to have that conversation specifically about how we invest in transit and transportation going forward. We are falling behind our neighbors to the south. They've both put in dedicated funding sources for transportation, and they utilize that to enhance their transit system. We need to have some serious conversations in our community about how we intend to fund a lot of the big ideas and the great things that we're starting to talk about and are continuing to plan going forward. And I think that's just the reality of the situation. Transit and transportation are expensive. They cost money. Transit is not necessarily a profitable organization. It's not a profitable business, which is why mostly governments are in the business of doing that. But the reality of it is that we've got to work together in partnership, both businesses and with our governments in doing that. And I'll just share one example of it. Related companies here in downtown West Palm Beach, great developers building a lot, came to the county and said, look, we're really engaged and interested in business. They're part of Jonathan's organization, and we want to help fund it, and we want to help engage and use some of our resources to do that. So at the request of Commissioner Greg Weiss, Related, and others, the county commission partnered with Related in going to Tallahassee to create some technology enhancements along the Okeechobee corridor. We've got about $3.5 million in the budget, in the state budget right now, that we hope to bring back to help introduce some more of that advanced technology into our signalization system here so that we can move buses, that we can move cars a little more quickly and efficiently through those areas. Those are the kinds of things that it's going to take as we move forward, investing in that technology and working together and looking at how we're going to fund a lot of the big ideas that we have going forward.
I think Todd hit it on the head with that. We are part of the Miami urbanized area to the federal government. This is one urban area between Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade County. We're talking about people that are commuting from Martin and beyond. 10 years ago, I was working in downtown Miami. 2/3 of my office lived in Palm Beach, in Broward, and beyond. So this growth is coming. We're expecting to grow by another 1 million people in the next 20 to 25 years. We are the only county in the urbanized area that does not have a dedicated transportation surtax. What does that mean? It means that it can fund operations and maintenance for transit investments. Why is that important? Because without that, organizations like mine that direct state and federal dollars can't match. There's no match to the capital. So if the county doesn't have a dedicated funding source for operations and maintenance, you can't leverage federal and state dollars for premium transit. So that's a conversation that this county, this community, it's going to take a village, is going to have. But we're looking right now, it's a very special time. Every 5 years, we're required to update our long-range transportation plan. Todd talked about looking into the future. The funding we program is always 5 years out, but we're looking out into 20, 25 years out. And that update as a region and as a county happens every 5 years. It's happening now. So we're looking for input. We're looking at where are we growing? How are we growing? What are our priorities? And what's going to be cost feasible? How are we going to get there? That plan will be adopted by our board later this year in December, but it's in a very special time. So we need to look into the future, and it does take time. But if we really want to continue to have economic growth, quality of life, if we want to retain talent and attract talent, we were talking about, we're all struggling trying to fill positions. People don't want to live in not everyone wants to live in a car-only oriented community. They want options. They want to be able to walk and go to the park and go do stuff that doesn't require them to only drive in their car into their garage and back to the front door. Some people like that, but not everybody. So looking forward, we need to look at mobility options and those investments if we want to really continue to have the amazing quality of life that we have here in this county.
Absolutely, Valerie. Options sound nice. Thank you all for this final panel. I would like to invite Michael McGowan, the Executive Director, up to the stage. And lastly, please a round of applause for the panelists.